You checked your balance this morning and you braced before you looked. Everybody does it. You tighten slightly, you glance, you close the app. And on the days the number is fine, the relief lasts about 4 minutes. I want to tell you where that stops. Not where you get rich, where you stop flinching. Because it's a specific number, it's much lower than you've been told, and almost nobody names it. It isn't $1 million. It isn't 6 figures. It's 20,000. And here's the strange thing about it, which is the actual reason I'm making this video. The first 20,000 is the hardest money you will ever save. Every 20,000 after it comes faster. Not because you get better at saving, because you stop being the only one working. Let me put one number in front of you now, so you know I'm not going to waste your time. $500 a month, 8% a year. Your first 20,000 takes about 36 months. Your second takes about 29. Same money, same rate, same discipline, 7 months faster, and that gap keeps widening every single time. I'll show you exactly how far it goes in a minute, and the last number genuinely surprised me. I'm Sam. I don't sell courses, and I'm not going to tell you this is easy. I spend most of my time in spreadsheets asking one question: why does money behave so differently depending on how much of it you already have? If this is useful, subscribing helps. That's the whole ask. Here's what nobody explains properly. Wealth doesn't grow in a line. It grows in a curve, and the flattest, most demoralizing stretch of that curve is the beginning. Which is exactly where you are if you're near the start, and exactly why it feels like nothing is happening. Think about pushing a car in neutral. The first few feet are brutal. You're leaning in with everything you have, and it barely moves, and you start wondering whether you're strong enough for this. Then it's rolling, and you're not pushing anymore. You're walking beside it with one hand on the door. 20,000 is roughly where the car starts rolling. Here's what that looks like in months. 500 a month, 8%, first 20,000, about 36 months. 3 years of declining things, watching a balance crawl, quietly wondering if any of it is working. Second 20,000, about 29 months. Third, about 24. You didn't get a raise. You didn't find a better fund. You didn't take more risk. The only thing that changed is that you now have money that shows up to work every day whether or not you do. Keep going and it stops being subtle. At around 200,000 invested, the next 20,000 takes about 11 months. At 400,000, about 6. Read that again. The amount that cost you 3 years of real sacrifice eventually appears in half a year, while you're asleep. And there's a smaller number inside the first milestone that I think is the more useful one to hold. 20,000 at 8% produces about $1,600 a year. That's roughly $133 a month, arriving on its own. A phone bill, a week of groceries. That's not freedom. It's the first month in your life where something other than your labor paid for part of it. But if this were only a math story, the video would end here. It doesn't, because the bigger change isn't in the spreadsheet. When you have nothing saved, every decision runs through one question: can I survive this month? That's not weakness. It's what a brain does under pressure. It narrows. And that narrowing is expensive in ways that never appear on a statement. Let me make it concrete. Say your car needs a $900 repair. With savings, you pay $900 and it's finished. Without savings, it goes on a card at 24% and you clear it over 8 months. Total paid, about $985. You didn't make a worse decision. You made the only decision available to you, and it charged you $85 for the privilege of not having the money on hand. $85 sounds survivable. It is. That's exactly what makes it dangerous. It's never the one repair that breaks anybody. Now multiply that by a decade of ordinary life. The deductible you keep high because the premium is what you can see this month? The job you took because you couldn't afford to wait 3 weeks for a better offer. The cheap boots you buy twice. Being broke has a price, and it isn't charged in dollars. It's charged in options. Which raises an obvious objection, and I want to deal with it before you do. You might be thinking there's something else going on here. That people with money get access to things you don't. Better funds, private deals, some door that opens at a certain number. At the very top, sure, but that is not what's happening at 20,000. 10% on $2,000 is $200. Nice. Forgettable. 10% on 20,000 is 2,000. Same percentage, same risk. Literally the same index fund you could have bought on day one with your first $100. The strategy didn't get smarter. It got bigger. Scale is the entire trick, and that's the part people miss for years. If that just reframed something for you, subscribe. Everything on this channel is this: slow, with real numbers, no shouting. Now here's what I think is the most important thing in this video, and it's the hardest to put on a chart. When you save $20,000, the money is not the valuable thing you built. Think about what it took. 3 years of knowing where it went. 3 years of declining things you genuinely wanted. 3 years of not touching it in the months where touching it would have been easy and reasonable and nobody would ever have known. You didn't accumulate $20,000. You proved something about yourself that cannot be proved any other way. That you can want something and wait. That isn't a finance skill. That's the skill. It just happens to show up in an account. And notice that it's the only part of this nobody can give you. Someone can hand you $20,000 tomorrow. There's decent evidence that people who receive money suddenly through inheritances, settlements, or lottery wins often end up back where they started within a few years. The number arrived. The person who could hold it didn't. You built both at once. That's the part that doesn't reset. And it quietly changes what you notice. Before, an unexpected expense was an emergency. The car, the tooth, the rent increase. Each one derailed a month. After, the same events are Tuesdays. Annoying, handled, forgotten by Thursday. Nothing about the events changed. Only your capacity to absorb them, which leads to the effect I think is worth more than the returns, and almost nobody talks about it. 20,000 changes your relationship with your job. Living paycheck to paycheck, you negotiate from the weakest position a person can occupy, and everyone in the room can feel it, including you. You don't ask for the raise. You don't push back on the deadline. You don't take the interview, because an afternoon off is a risk you can't cover. 20,000 is roughly enough to survive several months without income. You will probably never use it that way. That is not the point. The point is that you walk into the same meetings differently. You ask the question you'd have swallowed. You say, "Let me think about it," instead of "yes." People respond to that, not because you told them anything, but because they can tell. The quiet irony: the money you save to protect yourself usually earns you more through your career than it ever returns through your portfolio. Which is exactly why the next part costs people so much. Here's where I watch people undo all of it. They hit 20,000, feel the shift, and read it as a finish line. 3 years of telling yourself no is a long time. So they buy the car, take the trip, put it down on something they can't quite carry. I understand it completely, and it resets you to zero. Not just financially, it resets the thing that took 3 years to build. 20,000 isn't a reward for good behavior. It's the first 20,000. And once you see the curve, you can't unsee it in ordinary purchases. A $30,000 car isn't $30,000. That same money at 8% is about $205,000 in 25 years. Over 20 years, still around $140,000. That's not an argument against owning a car. It's an argument for knowing what one actually costs before you sign. And here's what surprised me. People who start thinking this way don't become miserable and frugal. They just find out they wanted about half the things they thought they wanted. So the first 20,000 is the hardest. It's slow, it's unglamorous, and it will feel like it isn't working right up until the moment it obviously is. Everything after gets easier. Not easy, easier, then easier again. If you're in that first stretch right now, watching a number move slower than you'd like, you're not behind. You're in the part everyone walks through, including every person you've envied for making it look effortless. They did their 3 years earlier, and nobody filmed it. It's supposed to feel like this. That's not evidence you're doing it wrong. It's the only evidence you've started. Next week, I'm running this same breakdown on the first 100,000, where the curve stops being gentle and starts being absurd. Subscribe so you catch it.